Indra, what an honor to have you with us today. And we spent a lot of time talking about 21st century leaders. And there is no better representative than yourself in that area.
Mike, first of all, I have to tell you, I was absolutely scared to come here. Future of Health Summit, the CEO of PepsiCo here. I said, are you sure Mike didn't have an open slot for which he needed a warm body? So that was my first concern. But I really came because I'm absolutely in awe of what you're doing with this future of health. And I think it's a topic that has to be talked about. And I'm just thankful that you're doing this. And I'm happy to be here, but give me a break.
Well, one of the things I know, Indra, is that really from the day you arrived, you created your own breaks. You created your own vision. And to take a company that operates in almost every country in the world today and to change its culture, we all know that culture quite often beats strategy every time. So the governing philosophy of the company you've created when you became CEO more than a decade ago is called Performance with Purpose. Tell us about that program and the progress you've made.
Thanks, Mike. And for those of you who don't know PepsiCo, we are the second largest food and beverage company in the world, about $64 billion in revenue. One of the long-lasting food and beverage companies in the industry. Our portfolio ranges from all the fun-for-you products that you know, the Pepsi, the Mountain Dew, the Doritos, Cheetos, Fritos, all that good stuff, to good-for-you products like Quaker Oats, Tropicana, Stacy's, Sabra Hummus. So we have a wonderful range of what I call fun-for-you products, then better-for-you products like diet products, zero-calorie products, and good-for-you products, products that give you positive nutrition. And even though we're called PepsiCo, the namesake Pepsi drink is less than a fifth of the company. So it's a very diversified company. When I took over as CEO in 2006, I realized that things had to change in the food and beverage industry as a whole, but for PepsiCo for sure, because I was noticing that consumer tastes were changing substantially. Millennials in particular wanted to come to work for a company that had a purpose and was making a difference in the world. And the food and beverage industry was sort of a legacy industry. To retain the best and the brightest in our company and to attract the best and the brightest, we had to create an environment in the company which allowed people to bring their whole selves to work. And that was a daunting task. Performance with Purpose was not a corporate social responsibility project. It was not us doing something and the money we make, we give to some charitable contribution to do good in some country. Because I believe that just doing a CSR program is like confession. You do whatever you want in your business and then you try to absolve yourself by just parking some money someplace. I wanted the fundamental model of the company to change so that you couldn't deliver performance without purpose and you couldn't fund purpose without performance. So I had to create that co-dependent ecosystem. So what did we do? We said we're always a performance company because PepsiCo has always been a high-performing company. We were not going to compromise on that. There were going to be three planks to purpose. The first was human sustainability. We were going to fundamentally change our portfolio. We were going to increase the permissibility of our fun-for-you products by reducing the fat, sugar, salt content of our products. And I'll tell you about how we did it. We were going to dial up the good-for-you substantially. There's a massive culture change in the company. And we were going to start providing affordable nutrition to underserved communities. So that was the human sustainability plank. The environmental sustainability plank, which is the second one, was reducing water use, increasing recycling, reducing our carbon footprint. And in the environmental sustainability goal, we had to have those goals because had we not done that, societies would not have allowed us to operate there because we operate in many water-distressed societies. The third was the people plank. How do we create an environment where we can attract the best and the brightest and keep them there? So we had all the programs to not just encourage diversity, but to really encourage inclusion. Because we can bring people in the door, but if they don't feel included and feel welcomed in the company, it's all for naught. Since we put the program in place in 2006, I have to tell you, the company has been transformed. Everything we do in the company today is with an eye towards performance with purpose. And the reason we've been a successful performer over the last decade is because we've transformed the portfolio. We've done the things right on the environmental footprint, which has actually given us more profits to reinvest in the company. And we've held on to our best and brightest. We lose some now and then, but we've held on to our best and brightest. Performance with purpose is in the DNA of the company. It's the reason why young people to come to work in the company. And if we didn't have performance with purpose today, many people would leave. So it's been a very positive story.
I think this is really one why we're so honored to have you with us today. What is a CEO in the 21st century? Can you attract the best and brightest to come to work for your company? If they don't feel that your company is making a contribution, the answer is no. There's too much competition today, so it's not just a job, and it's not just pay. And second, as you've seen here, you cannot be involved with the charity on the weekends and run a business during the week. And so many people have tried to change strategy without changing culture. And so it has been an amazing thing. So I often wonder, how did growing up in southern India inform your leadership in this concept of sustainability goals that you've taken on at Pepsi? If you take us back, many of us in the group today, most of us didn't have the luxury of growing up in southern
luxury
India at the time. So give us a little bit about what it was like growing up in southern India. And how does that relate to your thinking today?
I think it's the lack of luxury which might have influenced a lot of my thinking. You know, growing up, we didn't have many of the processed foods that we have today. Everything was made fresh. In fact, growing up, you know, my mother, we bought vegetables twice a day and we cooked everything fresh. So we grew up with a very healthy diet, local diet. But more importantly, I grew up in Madras, which was water-starved. All my life living there. We had water 2 or 3 hours every morning, and usually from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. And you found every pot and pan you could in the house and you fill water. It'll trickle down a pipe and you fill water in the pot. And that's what you use the whole day, but you always save some water for the next day in case the water didn't come out of the pipe the next day. This is for bathing, cleaning, cooking, drinking, everything. That's the only water you had. And my parents would sort of ration it out and say, you get 3 pots, you get 3 pots, each of you get these pots, and you learn to live within that. You've got to do everything within those 3 pots. There's nothing more available. So when you see water distress up front and you live with it, and then you're running a company which uses a lot of water to make a fun-for-you beverage, when you know that society or that community is struggling with water, you have a newfound respect for what that community goes through and what you have to do as a company. Then we realized that what we have to do is not just reduce the water usage in our plants. We had to bring all of our technologies to improve water usage in the community. So we had to expand our solutions to be much more holistic, and that's what we did. So I wouldn't say everything I do today was something I came out of my childhood, but clearly the water issue came out of my upbringing because I lived it myself. So even now, sometimes in shareholder meetings, people show up and talk to me about water use in PepsiCo. I always tell them, did you grow up in a water-distressed neighborhood? Did you ever grow up with water distress? Because my kids, I tell you, they take a half-hour shower. And I'm there banging on the door saying, why are you wasting water? And the answer to them was, Mom, get a life. We live in this country, not in India. Please, give me a break. I appreciate it. But it's the lack of luxury, lack of anything that gives you an appreciation for how to use the precious resources that we have today.
There's been a number of books written by leading economists on the idea of innovation at the bottom of the pyramid, necessity. And I think you've really addressed the issue. And India is a source of enormous innovation because they don't have the resources, they never had the resources.
Or the land, because as you think about plastic use going up, they don't have land for landfills. So we now have to think about creative solutions to increase recycling rates, because if we don't do it, at some point the landfills are going to be shut down and there'll be other consequences for our business models.
And so you've raised another interesting issue. I had a friend named Sir James Goldsmith, and he always used to ask me, who has a better life? The person I'm paying $1 million to who's living in New York City, or the person working on, he had a 25,000 acre ranch on the coast in Mexico, who gets fresh food, fresh vegetables, is outside, etc., who is paid just a fraction of that, which is a better life. And as we think about our food systems, etc., and think about the quality that you had as a young girl growing up, those are the challenges. And when we think about your job in 200 countries around the world and territories, and how do you leverage something? I think we'd all like to understand this better, that if you have an idea and you want to put forth a position, a purpose, or what you stand for, how do you spread that worldwide? Not just the people you're interacting with in your office from that standpoint.
It's interesting. Perhaps the single biggest challenge in my decade of being CEO is changing the culture of the company to make performance with purpose something that's deep in the DNA of the company, but not just the philosophy of PWP, but all the metrics, all the goals, to make sure that we deliver on them. Because what we've done as a company, Mike, is not just articulate this philosophy, everything is backed up by goals and deliverables by a certain date. And the fact that the whole company has to work together to deliver those goals is what makes it a daunting task. When we first started it, people were very skeptical. Many people said to me, look, we've been a successful company. Why do you want to change our product portfolio? Why do you want people to eat and drink differently? It's very hard to change tastes. And the example I will always give them is the following. I say, look, 15 years ago, I'd sit in PepsiCo meetings and I'd look to see what's on the credenza in terms of drinks. There'd be Pepsi, Diet Pepsi, Aquafina water, all of that would be there. And I'd look at the depletion rate at the end of a meeting. A lot of people drank the full sugar beverages, some diet, not much water. Fast forward today, the Aquafina depletes completely and the Diet Pepsi goes down some. And the full sugar drinks are barely touched. Now I look at this and go, if we are not consumers ourselves and actually making our own drinking habits and eating habits change, and if we are doing that, why do we believe other consumers are not doing that? So we had to bring this whole culture change to people in a more personal way, as opposed to talking about the consumer. Who is the consumer? We're all consumers in our business. So when you brought that message to them in a very personal way, they began to understand it. Second thing, we had to get it out to our rank and file, to the whole company. And we have 260,000 employees in 180 countries. The CEO cannot do it all. I did craft a message, we created videos, sent it out to the rest of the company. But I go back to World War I, when Woodrow Wilson created these 4-minute men. They had recruited an army of people who could make a case in 4 minutes as to why the country should go into World War I. That sort of a mechanism we adopted in PepsiCo. We trained a bunch of people to go out and take the message and then reinforce it constantly and get people to buy into the message. And that worked. The first 3 years when we did that, it worked. And the best example for me was I committed to the team that the annual report in PepsiCo, as long as I'm CEO, would always have performance with purpose on the cover. About 3 or 4 years ago, we did a draft of an annual report which didn't have those words, just to test the team. We brought the whole team together and asked them to pick which annual report execution they would like. They looked at this very puzzled and said, hey, wait a minute, unless we have the words performance with purpose on the cover, we are not going to approve any annual report. That to me says that it's not just a set of words, it's a philosophy, it's a method of operation, it's a deeply ingrained culture change that's happening in our company. The few things we had to do, we had to tie compensation to the PWP goals. It always works when you tie compensation. And then the few people who stood in the way of what we had to do. Look, you can't get rid of people, people who've been performing well in the old model. But we gave them time. We said, if you don't get onto the new agenda in the next 12, 24 months, there's going to have to be a lot of retirement parties. And there were a lot. We had quite a few retirement parties, and I call them retirement parties. They were genuinely retirement. And we said, look, you've got to go because you're now thwarting the agenda as opposed to being neutral to the agenda. So I think we've changed the culture of the company. It is who we are, and I'm proud of where we've gotten to.
I think we sometimes don't realize how difficult this is as a public company. Many things are a lot easier as a private company. Someone that's worried about what the next quarterly earnings are when you're trying to change the direction of an aircraft carrier. And so, Indra, I just want to stress, my admiration for what you've done as a private. I know you've received pressure from the activist investors. Why are we doing this? Well, you're trying to bring the company. Let's take a look at another company that's one of your competitors, Nestle. So Nestle made an announcement that they're going to be a health company. So instead of picking someone from inside of one of the world's largest consumer products companies, they went outside for the first time and picked someone running a substantially smaller health company to run their company. So as they're making this decision, they now announce we're going to be a health company. Well, social media is then all over them. Yes, you want to be a health company. First you give us diabetes, and then you're going to take care. So you're a 360 company. And as the company dealt with this issue, one, it was easy to buy a company in the plant food business, so they have the wherewithal, as you do. But they then made the decision to sell their chocolate division as a step, a noticeable step of what they were trying to become. So as you deal with the pressure of someone that's worried about next quarter earnings when you're trying to reposition the company, or dealing with part of your historical product line, how do you weigh those issues? And social media today is so powerful around the world from that standpoint.
Lethal, more than powerful. It's not easy, I'll be honest with you, Mike, because culture change, especially on such a large scale, with investors who are focused on the very short term, literally quarter to quarter. In fact, now they buy weekly sales results and they extrapolate from that. Makes it very hard to effect change on a slightly longer term basis. Very, very difficult. I have a plea to this group, that you've brought together. Look, the issue that we have is the whole issue of obesity, NCDs, non-communicable diseases, is a much broader issue than consuming any one product or the other. I think we have to deal with it holistically. And holistically has many, many, many aspects for it which require a lot of people coming together. In fact, your entire agenda this afternoon coming together. I'll give you an example. When we did the Buckle Up campaign, why did it work? It was a simple message. We reinforced it with the appropriate carrots and sticks. And Buckle Up today is working. Everybody's got a seatbelt on. What is the equivalent of Buckle Up to address this whole issue of obesity? Have we thought about it? Do we know what a healthy food is and what is not a healthy food? 10 years ago, 15 years ago when we bought Tropicana, 100% juice was very healthy. Now all of a sudden people have concluded that 100% juice may not be healthy. Now I'm like, what, do I just buy and sell based on somebody's most recent pronouncement about juice? I don't know. But I do know that everybody does not have access to fresh fruit and cannot consume it. Therefore, processed fresh fruit is 100% juice is not a bad alternative. So somebody needs to have a true north definition of what constitutes a healthy food. Are we willing to line up the incentives for agriculture with the incentives for nutrition? Today they're in opposition to each other. Are we willing to truly line up incentives for agriculture and nutrition? Are we willing to provide incentives to companies to formulate and sell healthy products? R&D credits. You do more healthy products, we will give you R&D credits. And finally, if you're thinking about any taxation, are we willing to think about sensible taxation? Sensible taxation saying, hey, look, everybody's not going to drink just water. If you're going to think about taxation, think about what levels of sweetness is allowed, what levels of sugar are allowed. And think about a sensible taxation that applies to that as opposed to we just need to put a tax in because we need revenue to fill a budget gap. That doesn't address the obesity issue. It's a feel-good program. So I think if we really believe that we have to address this issue, let us approach it holistically. Companies, regulators, governments, societies, communities, all coming together, and let us take an integrated approach to addressing it. And I'll be honest with you, companies like ours would like to be part of the solution. We are doing our part to be part of the solution, but I always think there are more headwinds than tailwinds against us.
So I think this is a challenge for all of us in the room, and the importance. We should all assume that great companies like PepsiCo fully understand that you can now sequence your microbiome and your biome and what you eat and how it's affecting your body, fully understand issues of inflammation in your body and its relationship to diseases that all of us have dealt with for decades, and how do we reduce the level of disease. And they need to be partners at the table. The products you put out today, I remember constantly reading how many grams of sugar have been eliminated, those millions of grams of sugar, and how much certain fats have been eliminated. And we've had Mamoon Khan come many times as part of the group. Why don't you discuss even why you hired Mamoon Khan and what is his role at PepsiCo?
Our chief scientific officer is Dr. Mahmood Khan. He used to head up a large part of Takeda Pharmaceuticals. He's an endocrinologist, trained doctor, practiced at the Mayo Clinic. And in 2007, I wanted to bring somebody into our company to head up R&D who would actually take us in a completely new direction as opposed to just formulating more line extensions of our core products. We interviewed a lot of people because we didn't have the profile of the candidate inside PepsiCo. But then when I met Mahmood, I realized that he had the right personality and the right background to take us to this new place I wanted the company to go to. But he was not convinced he should come to PepsiCo because he said, my budget in Takeda is $4.5 billion. Why would I come to PepsiCo? I mean, I'd have a fraction to work with. My argument to Mahmood was, the big difference between Takeda and PepsiCo is everything you formulate in PepsiCo, you can taste. In Takeda, obviously, he can't taste what he develops. And so I said to him, you can make change on a large-scale basis. I'll give you the resources you need. Just come and help us transform this food supply. And Mahmood came in. There's good news and bad news with having somebody like Mahmood. I look at it only as good news. Some people say, oh my God, did we need a real doctor? The problem with Mahmood is he approaches everything as, if you say this is the goal we're going to meet. There's no sort of wiggle room around the goal because he comes from a clinical background and everything has to be precise. So he holds our feet to the fire on every goal that we put out, and the discipline and the expenses we put behind the R&D programs to get to the goal. I love it. Some people say, man, he's such a pain in the ass, but that's what I love him for. I love him for that because he never gives up. That's what I love Mahmood for. The other thing that Mahmood does for us, which I like, is when we write our sustainability reports, if we have not met a goal, we write in the report why we couldn't meet the goal, because the technology didn't work, or we couldn't make the technology work in a certain product. So we are pretty honest about why we couldn't meet that goal in a certain time frame and why we are rethinking the time frame of the goal. So there's a level of truth telling in what we put out in our reports and how we operate the company that has sort of endeared Mahmood to everybody in the company. And lastly, Mahmood is making us invest in advanced technologies. We have a SEAL lab out in Hawthorne. I don't even allow our own people to go there because I'm afraid there's any budget pressure. They might say, oh, cut that SEAL lab out. So technologies that could impact anything we do 5-10 years from now. Mahmood's got scientists working on that. We have an omics laboratory where people are looking at nutrigenomics, metabolomics, all that stuff, and the impact on the makeup of the individual. Even that is sort of in the SEAL lab area where Mahmood can actually go play with these things so that we can influence the direction of development in the company. And Mahmood's been an absolute gem in PepsiCo and the best hire I've made in our company.
So when you look at large companies today, so few of them really survive decade after decade. Only one is left. that was originally in the Dow Jones, and that company, GE, is under enormous pressure today. And so the key, we talk a lot about disruption. There is no part of our world that is not experiencing disruption. Yes, we could understand it with newspapers and media and other type of issues. But every industry, agriculture dramatically with now inside of a warehouse being able to grow food, harvest it 20 times a year instead of 4 or 6, not have to deal with pollution in China or water, et cetera, by having a self-contained union, and dropping cost of light and dropping cost of water by 95% from that standpoint. And so I think what Indira has given us is a picture of disruption with inside a large company. And if we just look, and I'd like you to take a look as we look at the distribution of your products in the future. And just the explosion of, we have a lot of young companies here in the consumer product food area that have been using technology to try to create products. But when you look at, for example, Amazon, and its ability to deliver and influence customers in more than just 100 million in the United States that are in their Amazon Prime service today. And you're sitting at Kroger and you've been moving into organic and you've been moving in these areas, and you see your stock has now gone down 50% from potential disintermediation. We have representatives from CVS and Walgreens, and Amazon announced the other day, well, maybe they need to distribute pharmaceuticals to you from that standpoint. How do you see this disruption in an industry where you think about the distribution chain of who is selling your products, how your products are being sold today? So we always used to focus on how dependent a company was on Walmart. Now, so many companies, Amazon is actually a larger customer than Walmart today. How are you dealing with this change in your distribution system?
With fear in the belly. I tell you, the industry is going through changes that are more profound than anything I've seen in a few decades. Every aspect of the business is changing. Product portfolio. Small companies are taking a lot of the growth. They don't last, but they sort of boom splat, but they're taking a lot of the growth. You've got a confused consumer. One day sugar is bad, the other day HFCS is bad, third day artificial sweeteners is bad. So a consumer that's confused and doesn't really know how to decide what to eat or drink. People who are my age shopping one way, young people shopping a different way. To me, going to the grocery store was actually an enjoyable experience. Maybe I'm one of a kind, but I like the social nature of going to a grocery store, talking to other shoppers, interacting with the shelf and figuring out what the new products were. My kids order everything online, off of mom and dad's budget. But, they order everything online. I mean, they go to farmers markets and buy organic, natural, freshly grown produce. So we're looking at a whole new world. And you can either look at this and say, man, it's terrifying, or how exciting, this is going to reset the competitive balance. I'm looking at it as it can reset the competitive balance, because companies that recognize the changes and start to retool their model, for example, treating Amazon both as a friend and a foe. They're going to be a competitor to you if you don't deliver great innovation supported by big brands. But then it makes us more agile and more flexible to do things that Amazon needs. All of the traditional brick and mortar retailers are going to do new things in their store besides some sort of a .com activity. How do we partner with them to make sure that we have the right offerings for them, the right package sizes, the right multi-packs? So it's actually making us a better company. Is the transition easy? No. Because we have to keep the old model going and the new model, and they have to coexist, and they both need investment. So we have to get more productive as a company to generate more costs to invest in both until the crossover happens. So I think that these are exciting times, and I put exciting in quotes because it might be exciting, but every day when you read something, there's either an acquisition or a major technology that's going to change the world, you sit there going, can all of these guys take a holiday? I'll pay for your vacation. Just go for a holiday. Give us a break to catch up. But I know that, from that California that you come from, Mike, nothing stops. So we just have to sort of be prepared for exciting change and go along with it.
And in closing, you had a question, not just for me, but for the entire audience. The group with us today employs more than 10 million people in their companies or the companies they control or their responsibilities in government. And I know you've been quite concerned about how to get better access to affordable care
Right.
to everyone across the socioeconomic range today. And if you wanted to leave us as a challenge today, what is that challenge you'd like to give us?
Well, the thing that I worry about the most is I watch a lot of people in the lower income group who try to get a medical appointment with a specialist, and they wait 3, 4, 5 weeks. Or if they have a cancer diagnosis, to get a radiation appointment or to get a appointment to see a specialist, they're just way bottom in the queue. And I worry about this because I say to myself, many of these people are the breadwinners in the family. They really need to get better fast in order to take care of their families, yet they're the ones that are forgotten in the overall prioritization process. How do we make sure that those people are given an equal access to the right medical care as opposed to constantly being pushed down in the queue? And I watch it firsthand with some people I work with, and it's very, very painful. Even when you use your contacts to get them in the appointment, based on their insurance or based on who they are, they get bumped. So if there's one thing that I hope we can do is not say good medical care is something that is available for the good payers. It's good medical care available for any citizen who needs it on equal priority. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but I worry about that a lot because I've seen too many examples up front and close where it's a real challenge, especially in the cancer area, Mike. It's really difficult.
So as many of you know, we've launched a new program with the VA for cancer. So if you've served the country or you're in the VA system, you will no longer be treated just by the VA, but by the leading cancer center in the area. And we had a real live example recently with a patient who had a PSA for prostate cancer at over 200. It probably would have eventually just passed away in the Puget Sound VA, but the teaming up with the University of Washington and Fred Hutch as a team, that person is in total remission today. And so I think these are challenges for all of us because equal access is really important as part of our democracy as we think about these issues.
Thank you.
So, Indra, I want to thank you for joining us, and I also want to just reiterate for the group, today there are more companies controlled by private equity than are public. Half of the companies listed have disappeared. And part of the reason is the pressure to make change as a public company and the flexibility. What you've done at PepsiCo is really a roadmap for the various companies around the world to meet the challenges, to meet the age of genomics and your biome in your area. And we really appreciate your leadership in this area. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.